June 30, 1960. The Congo had just torn free from Belgium's brutal colonial grip. And on that day, a man named Patrice Lumumba stood before the world. His voice fiery, his words unshackled. He spoke of unity, of freedom, of a future where Congo ruled itself. But in just months, he'd be imprisoned, tortured, executed. His body would vanish, dissolved in acid, as if he never existed. Welcome to the Jackie Show. I am Jackie, and this is the true crime story of Patrice Lumumba. Patrice Lumumba was born into a family of farmers on 2nd June 1925. He came from the Katakokombe region of the Kasai province of the Belgian Congo. He was a member of the Tetela ethnic group. He was raised in a Catholic household. As a child, Lumumba was defined by his intelligence, often pointing to others' errors, including his teachers. Patrice was an overachiever, and he spoke 5 different languages. After finishing school, Lumumba worked as a traveling beer salesman as well as a postal clerk. He was a poet, a philosopher, and he enjoyed reading. During the 1950s, after the Second World War, independence movements became popular throughout Africa, and Patrice Lumumba began focusing his attention on political matters. Because of his interest in politics and his desire to see a change in the Congo, Patrice Lumumba helped found the Movement National Congolais Party, MNC, which was a left-wing movement that drew support across the ethnic spectrum. His personal charisma led him to have a huge following in comparison to other leaders of the movement. In October of 1959, Lumumba was arrested for inciting a riot in which 30 people lost their lives. His trial was meant to start on January 18, 1960, and it was also the start date of the Brussels Round Table Conference, which was organized to decide the future of the Congo. Under pressure from the MDC, Lumumba was released and allowed to attend the conference. After 9 days of discussion, the conference culminated in a decision to grant the Congo independence. National elections would be held on May 11 to May 25, while full independence would be granted on June 30th. Patrice Lumumba had witnessed the horrors of Belgian rule firsthand. While Congo's rubber and minerals made Europe rich, its people endured slavery, mutilation, and starvation. Lumumba's demand for independence was fierce. Patrice Lumumba's MDC party won the elections. This 1960 election, the Congo's first free election, handed Lumumba's party a plurality, not a majority. In order to govern, Lumumba forged a very shaky coalition with his rival, Joseph Kasavubu. In the end, Kasavubu became the president of the Republic of Congo, while Patrice Lumumba became the first prime minister of the Democratic Republic of Congo. A ceremony was held to celebrate the independence of the Congo, and at that ceremony, Belgian King Baudouin gave a patronizing speech urging the new country not to commit to hasty reforms, and the king went on to praise the genius of his great-grand-uncle, King Leopold II. King Leopold, the same king that committed such atrocities to the Congolese people. King Baudouin praised the works of his great-uncle, and he praised colonialism. The speech was so patronizing that Lumumba, who was not even scheduled to speak, took the mic, and what he said shook the room. Lumumba said, quote, "For this independence of the Congo, although being proclaimed today by agreement with Belgium, an amicable country with which we are on equal terms, no Congolese worthy of the name ever be able to forget that it was by fighting that it has been won. We are proud of the struggle, of tears, of fire, and of blood, and to the depth of our being. Patrice Lumumba also said, "We are no longer your monkeys. Congo's wealth will belong to the Congolese, and no Congolese will ever forget the struggle." The Belgian king was stunned. Western diplomats exchanged glances. Lumumba had broken the script and colonial pride. Lumumba had spoken before the world, not as a politician, but as a man, unleashing decades of pain and rage. In that moment, Patrice Lumumba's fate was sealed. Brussels saw humiliation, Washington saw red, and in the shadows, Lumumba's ally and friend, a 29-year-old army colonel named Joseph Mobutu, scribbled his notes, and he saw his path to power suddenly clear. Patrice Lumumba's speech drew widespread criticism from Western journalists. They believed that it would stoke the fires of conflict and lead to violence against Belgians in the Congo. The sensationalism of the speech brought global fame to Patrice Lumumba, with many Western nations suddenly aware that Patrice Lumumba represented a threat to their capitalist interests. This speech sealed his fate. Work began to enact reforms across the country. The army was increasingly dissatisfied with the pace of progress. They were hoping for salary increase and better working conditions. When this did not materialize, localized mutinies began springing up and throughout the armed forces. Lumumba increased the pay grade of all soldiers and Africanized the armed forces. He placed Sergeant Major Victor Lundula as general and commander-in-chief, and one of his friends, Joseph Mobutu, as the chief of staff. Europeans were only kept on advisory roles. But despite all these changes, the armies continued to mutiny. Behind closed doors, other countries were plotting against Patrice Lumumba. Within days after its independence, the Congo was in chaos. It exploded. Lumumba's enemies saw opportunity in that fracture. Belgium funneled guns and secessionists. One of Lumumba's rivals, Moise Tshombe, announced a cessation of the Katanga province. Katanga province was where much of the Congo's resources were located. It was rich in minerals like copper and uranium. Belgian troops responded by sending 6,000 soldiers to restore order, and most of them went to the Katanga province. Patrice Lumumba was asking for help from the West, but the help did not come, and the United Nations had no mandate to operate effectively. So Lumumba and Kasavubu were stuck. In the end, Lumumba decided to ask for help from the Soviet Union. That act alone made the Western leaders anxious. It was an act that confirmed suspicions to them that Lumumba was a danger to the Western interests. And this was in the heat of the Cold War. Patrice Lumumba traveled to the United States to look for financial help and technical assistance. But unfortunately, the US Secretary of State at the time told him that the USA would only send aid through the United Nations. Lumumba then met with the United Nations Secretary General, Dag Hammarskjöld, but Lumumba left the meeting feeling unsatisfied. He believed that the United Nations did not have the commitment to help or resolve the crisis. Then Lumumba went to Canada. He tried to get help there, but that was denied too. Countries like Guinea and Ghana pledged independent military support. There was a rebellion in the Kasai province. Lumumba was reluctant, but he decided to authorize the military to suppress the rebellion in the Kasai province. The action was successful, but it led to ethnic violence. There was now a growing rift between Patrice Lumumba and Joseph Kasavubu over the way forward through the crisis. But this teetering alliance would crack under the weight of foreign sabotage and betrayal. In the heat of this growing rift, for 67 days, Lumumba fought to hold his coalition together. But on September 5, 1960, Kasavubu made his move, illegally dismissing Lumumba from his position as Prime Minister of the Congo. Mobutu's troops sealed the coup. The democracy Congo had dreamed of was dead. Patrice Lumumba retaliated by dismissing Kasavubu as president of the Congo. In the midst of all these rifts, Colonel Mobutu, his ally, turned against him. Joseph Mobutu decided to take this opportunity to act. He launched a coup d'etat and had Lumumba arrested. Mobutu sided with Kasavubu and he seized power on the 14th of September 1960. Patrice Lumumba and his family were placed under house arrest and they were guarded by the soldiers of the United Nations. Fearing for the worst while under arrest, Patrice Lumumba decided to escape. He had been told that there was a stronghold his supporters had gathered in Stanleyville. Patrice Lumumba hoped to join the stronghold in Stanleyville so that he would regain his power and take over the government once more. 1 December 1960, under the cover of darkness, Lumumba slipped past United Nations guards. Taking his aides with him, fled his home in Leopoldville, racing towards Stanleyville. There, his loyalists awaited, but so did betrayal. Patrice's escape route took him through the countryside. December 1, 1960, near Port Franqui, Mobutu's troops ambushed Lumumba's convoy. They bound his wrists with ropes, not handcuffs, a deliberate humiliation. Beaten, stripped, he was paraded through Leopoldville like a trophy, while Belgian officers took photos and videos. The message was clear. This was not an arrest. It was a ritual of colonial vengeance. The way Lumumba was treated wasn't just cruelty. It was a lesson to anyone daring to defy the empires. Patrice Lumumba was arrested along with his associates, Maurice Mbolo and Joseph Okito. The three were imprisoned at the Thiesville military barracks, guarded by soldiers whose loyalty teetered dangerously. Mobutu and his Belgian advisors knew the truth. Lumumba's charisma could spark a mutiny at any moment. The soldiers favored Lumumba. Panicked, they orchestrated a midnight flight, bundling Lumumba, Okito, and Bolo onto a plane bound for Katanga, the cessationist province of Moise Tombe. Tombe was a puppet of the mining interests of the Belgians, and he had already destroyed thousands of Lumumba's supporters, and now they knew he would deliver the final blow. January 17, 1961, deep in the Katangan bush, under a moonless sky, Lumumba and his two allies, Joseph Okito and Maurice Mbolo, were dragged into a clearing. Belgian officers watched as Katangese soldiers lined them up. No trial, no last words, only the cold flick of rifle bolts. One by one, the gunfire rang out. Under the watchful eye of the Belgians, Patrice Lumumba and his two friends were shot dead. Their bodies were dumped into a shallow grave. But the horror didn't end there. To erase all evidence, Belgian Police Commissioner Gerald Zolte dissolved their remains in sulfuric acid. For decades, he kept Lumumba's gold-capped tooth as a trophy, a grisly souvenir of colonialism's final revenge. Investigations carried out later, decades later, suggest that the CIA and the Belgian government was part of the plan to assassinate Patrice Lumumba. He was betrayed by the very people he promoted, his allies, his friends. Patrice Lumumba only fought for his own people's independence, total independence. He only wanted what was best for the people of the Congo. His body disappeared as if he'd never existed. He was only prime minister for 10 weeks. He was executed at the age of 35, and he remains a martyr, and his legacy lives on. In the year 2022, exactly 61 years after the execution of Patrice Lumumba, the Belgian government returned the tooth of Patrice Lumumba, the only thing that was remaining from his whole body. The King of Belgium, King Philippe, expressed his deepest regret for the wounds of the past. This is the sad story of Patrice Lumumba.